What's up, everyone? K Ruggs, the Soberdog here. I got a very special guest with me today, Brian Cuban. Brian, so glad you could make it on, and awesome to see. I appreciate you coming on. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing good, thanks. I saw a couple of your videos online, and I'm sure, of course, too, you know, your older brother's extremely famous, so it's always something brought up. Younger brother of Mark Cuban, and I got more into it, but then addiction recovery advocate, body dysmorphic advocate. Can you give us a little bit of rundown of your story? How did he get into everything?
Happy to. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I have rolling on to 15 years of recovery from alcohol and cocaine abstinence. I'm a lawyer by trade, but I no longer practice law. I haven't practiced in 10 years. I was born in Pittsburgh, the middle of three boys. Mark, people know, the older brother, Shark Tank and the Mavs. I have a younger brother, Jeff. I moved to Dallas and I went to law school at Pitt Law, University of Pittsburgh School of Law, Penn State undergrad, moved to Dallas 1986 after law school. At that point, when I moved to Dallas, I was already struggling with alcohol, quote unquote alcoholic. I'd been drinking heavily since college. Added cocaine to the resume the summer of 1987. And then cocaine and alcohol kind of took over my life. As a practicing lawyer, I eventually lost my clients and no longer had a practice as a result of drugs and alcohol. 2 trips to a psychiatric facility, the first after a near suicide attempt in 2005. Jail, was arrested. And then 3 failed marriages related to drugs and alcohol. And then finally, I began my recovery journey Easter weekend 2007.
Wow. Again, congratulations on your recovery. I heard in another video I was watching the other day with you, I heard you say something that the first time you did cocaine, you knew you were addicted. And that old saying of people say, first, no one gets addicted the first time they do drugs.
Well, we have to be careful how we use addiction, right? Addiction is a very broad term. People say I'm addicted to spin, right? To Peloton and this and that. So I would say that I became psychologically dependent on it the first time I used it. In terms, I would become physically addicted to it, right? Physically, I would become addicted to it. And the definition of addicted is obsessive compulsive drug-seeking behavior, regardless, in the face of known and probable consequences, right?
Sure.
But so I would become dependent and addicted, but the feeling that came over me, I had to have it again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I did that first line of cocaine in that bathroom in Dallas in 1987 in this nightclub, I was a young man, I was 26, who had never loved himself in his life, right? I had been through a lot of trauma. I'd been bullied severely as a child. And so every time I looked in the mirror, I just saw somebody I hated and I thought everyone else hated. So I did that line and then boom, I loved myself for the first time. Looked in the mirror and had to have it again. Who doesn't want to love themselves, even if it was artificial? And so I had to have that again and again and again so I can keep loving myself.
Sure. That's
the high wears off, right? You don't love yourself anymore,
mm-hmm.
and you hate yourself.
Exactly.
And so you have to go. It's a vicious cycle.
That's exactly why, I thought it was important to bring up, because I could relate to that so much too, with that cocaine and other substances, of just these expectations and all this stuff going on in the head, finally for a couple minutes was gone. And, then, I remember like 13 getting drunk for the first time, and it was like, oh, now I see why adults have that glass of wine. They don't judge themselves so much or fill in the blank.
Yeah.
But like you just said, it gets worse and worse. It doesn't do what it, quote, supposed to do the more we do. And then it just,
then you're just chasing that next line, that next line to recapture that feeling, right?
Exactly.
It comes with less frequency. And the old saying, cocaine's fun till it's not.
Yep.
And it became not for me.
Yeah. And I love watching people like Dr. Andrew Huberman, when they talk about like the dopamine and just the devastation cocaine, meth, some of these upper drug, well, any substance, so to speak, but creates in the brain. And did it take you a while into recovery to kind of get pleasure back from certain
Sure.
things?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the first 6 months was the first 3 months was exceptionally brutal.
Yeah.
The first 6 months was brutal, and the first year was tough. But fortunately, I had the fellowship with my 12-step group. That's my path, abstinence, right?
Sure.
That's what I chose. There were many paths to recovery.
Yeah.
But for me, there was no, I wasn't going to do a line of cocaine a week, right? If there was a baggie, it was gone.
Yeah.
So abstinence had to be my path.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was tough because I was also had to feel my feelings without cocaine. And I also had to deal with the trauma of my childhood without cocaine or alcohol.
Sure.
So yeah, it was tough, but I surrounded myself with people who were also dealing with those things. And I went in, I did 100 meetings in 90 days, because
For you.
you go in and you sit down and you go through all the rituals, right?
Yeah.
Take your dealer's name out of you change your phone number, but you take all your dealer's name out of the, but I know it by heart, right? And you change your phone, so you change your phone number so your cocaine and alcohol friends can't contact you, but I know their numbers by heart.
Yeah.
So you throw away all the wine glasses, you go through the rituals, but that doesn't really protect you from the pull, right?
No.
From the I got to get it, or I'm going to be, or I'm going to die, or I'm going to this or that. So yeah, it was very important to have people around me during those very difficult times.
I'm a big 12-step person too. It helped save my life. So I absolutely
and my
relate
family
to that.
too. I'm very fortunate. It's a privilege because a lot of people don't have this. I have a very close family and my wife, who were all very supportive in my recovery.
Awesome. That's incredible. Yeah, the rituals. That's funny. Can you explain a little bit about this is something I really do not know much about, the body dysmorphia, and how did that play into the?
Sure. To understand that, you really have to go back to my childhood. Like I said, I was born in Pittsburgh, PA, a suburb, Mount Lebanon. I'm a baby boomer. And this was a time when cell phones were 2 cups attached to a string. And social networking was playing dodgeball right on the basketball blacktop. My older brother, Mark, the firstborn, was outgoing and, as you might expect, the firstborn. And he was very entrepreneurial at a very young age, selling this door to door, selling that door to door. And I remember when our local newspaper went on strike. Actually, it was a printer strike, and they stopped printing. And he and his buddies drove from Pittsburgh to Cleveland, about 200 miles, bought their newspapers and drove them back to Pittsburgh and sold them on a street corner for twice what they paid for them. So you knew what he was going to be. My younger brother, Jeff, is a jock, nationally ranked wrestler, beer parties, girls, prom, all very social, all the things that I associated with acceptance. And I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy, I was withdrawn, and I kind of internalized anything negative said about me and wore it as who I was, like a skin tight suit. And unfortunately, I also had a difficult relationship with my mother. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but I want to make it clear to anyone who watches your podcast, I do not blame my parents for anything I went through. Parents do not cause addiction. Parents do not cause, eating disorders or anything. There's a difference between cause and correlation. And so, but there was a lot of fat shaming in my house. I used to come home, and I was a heavy kid to begin with, a heavy teen. And I used to come home from school and I would pull out a can of Chef Boyardee beefaroni or ravioli or SpaghettiOs from the cabinet, and I'd get the old style can opener, and we didn't have a microwave. This was in the 70s. I'd stick the spoon in, and my mom would come home from selling real estate, walk into the kitchen, and say, "If you keep eating that way, you were going to be a fat pig." And these were the things my mom's mom said to her. She had a very verbally and abusive, mentally abusive relationship with her mother, who was a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic and had spent time in an institution, in a facility. Wow. So maybe some genetics there as well. Who knows?
Sure.
But and it was probably things my great grandmother said to my grandmother. Right? Fat shaming in family is often handed down generationally.
Yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle. So I don't blame my mother for any of that. I mean, my mother had her own mental health issues as a young woman in the 70s. When a woman talking about any such thing, you could be institutionalized or lose your children, right? Very different time. But not understanding these things, and and I was also experiencing bullying at school. I became depressed, began to eat more Chef Boyardee ravioli, and became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. And then the bullying really ramped up at school as I changed and became, heavier.
Yeah.
And called fat, the fat taunts, the fat teasing, and again, this is before the internet. And this is at a time when going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew, what was going on. Much different time. But this taunting all came to a head. This bullying and what I call the day of the gold pants. My brother Mark had given this was during the disco era. Do you know what disco is?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you ever seen Saturday Night Fever?
Yep. My dad always.
Yeah, John
disco
Travolta.
song,
I was a freshman in high school, so this is 1976. Disco was just getting into vogue, right?
Okay.
Saturday Night Fever was just coming out, the album and the movie. Yeah. And my brother was really big, and Mark was really big into the disco scene.
Oh, cool.
And so he had this pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants, just kind of like the ones John Travolta wore in Saturday Night Fever, except these were gold, his were white. And he gave them to me because he bought some new ones. Okay. But Mark wasn't a big guy. They fit him well. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like trying to get out. But I wore them because my brother gave them to me. I love my brother, and I wore them to school, and the kids taunted me and made fun of me because my stomach kind of hung over them, right? And they were tight. And I'm walking home from school one day with a group of kids, about a mile walk along a busy street in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And there were several kids, several guys. And in my mind, these were the guys that they're kind of bullyish, but they're the popular kids as well. The kids who are going to the football games I wanted to be invited to, going to the McDonald's, the local McDonald's to hang out, and the after school parties when the parents were out of town, right? All the things that I wanted so badly, going to the concerts together. So I would hang around with them and they would taunt me. And I hoped it was kind of like a fraternity hazing. Yeah. If I took it enough, one day one of them would say, "You're one of us now, kid," right?
Yeah, that's
not how bullying works.
Yeah.
That's not how bullying works. And I'm walking home with them wearing my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants, and they're teasing me, and they start pulling at them. And one of them tears them, right? A little tear. Then another one pulls and it tears some more. And then they were like wild dogs. Rabid dogs, and they physically assaulted me and tore off my pants, ripped them into shreds, threw them out in the busy street, down to my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities, my Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt, my Keds tennis shoes, and my tube socks. And they went on high-fiving like they'd done the funniest thing ever. And I walked out in the street and picked up the shreds and covered up my tighty whities and waddled home. People gawked, no one stopped, and I got home, and house was empty. It was funeral quiet. I walked down these wooden stairs to our basement, and the stairs creaked. Yeah. And with every creak, I felt like it reverberated throughout the world, throughout the high school, throughout the neighborhood, where everyone knew what had happened to me.
Sure.
I got to the bottom, and I found a wastebasket, and I buried the shreds in the wastebasket, hoping that would be the end of my shame and hide the trauma, and I'd forget about it. But that's not how trauma works. And that incident was so traumatic that I could go to that spot today in Pittsburgh and show you exactly where it happened. And it was right around then that I remember seeing my reflection and seeing someone who was just a fat pig and a monster who would never be loved, never get married, never have a girlfriend. And this was the reflection I began to see. And that was kind of the start of my body dysmorphia and my body image issues. And so that traumatic event. And now there were others. Again, it's so complex, right?
Sure.
Is there a genetic aspect? Is there a social aspect? Is there an environmental aspect? It was kind of like a perfect storm where everything came together to just cause me to look in the mirror. I would look see my reflection and just not even be able to look at myself in the mirror. Wow. And that was the beginning of those issues.
Wow. Yeah, you said that.
Yeah, I was cycling through all these behaviors, trying to change what I saw in the mirror, but the image never changed. I also abused anabolic steroids, the drinking, the cocaine, and so it was one of those things, cycling through, trying to change an image that never changed.
I was going to ask you that because I remember even on a very smaller scale doing cocaine to, I know when I do it, I don't eat as much. So as much as I was already physically and psychologically dependent on it, I would, there's times of like, oh, I could do it because then I know I'll eat half as much or I'll do less. So those all fed into it too. And it sounds like that was very simple, No,
I don't remember that aspect. I'm also in recovery from bulimia. I developed bulimia at Penn State. Yes, guys do get eating disorders, binging and purging. And
that's a powerful point. I'm glad you said that, because I
so,
think that's something not talked about enough.
I mean, that may have crossed my mind every now and then, but the primary reason I used cocaine was to feel differently about what I saw in the mirror, in my reflection, to feel better, to love myself.
Sure. Now, is your eating, I want to make sure I say it correctly, appropriately, eating disorder recovery and like addiction recovery, so to speak, do you have totally separate programs for them, or were they different times?
No, I mean, yeah, there's different types of therapy for sure. I mean, I think there's 12 steps for eating disorders, but I mean, what's the primary purpose, right? Desire to stop drinking. In my 12-step group is progressive. People talk about addiction, drug addiction as well.
Cool.
But yeah, they are different types of therapies and such for body image and eating disorders.
Sure. So what is Brian Cuban up to today? What do you do today? Well, you know, I see you got a couple books out, and you got a new one coming out. What's your your daily life today?
I just released my first novel. You can't see it because I have
the picture.
Okay, it's called The Ambulance Chaser, my first novel. It is about a Pittsburgh personal injury lawyer, Jason Feldman, who finds himself accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered.
Wow.
He's charged with a murder and arrested. He flees, becoming a fugitive from justice, to find the one person who can prove his innocence and save his abducted son.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it. It released 2 weeks ago, and when it released, it released as the BookScan #1 debut thriller, paperback thriller.
Congratulations!
So I saw the list. Yeah, it was crazy to see you. It's just 1 week in time, but it was surreal to see Stephen King was the name above mine.
Wow.
Now he sells thousands of books every week, right? But it was kind of surreal to see my name.
Yeah.
And John Grisham and James Patterson.
I know.
It opened as the #1 debut paperback thriller.
That's incredible.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's available on Amazon, wherever books are sold. So check it out. It's the reviews have been outstanding, and
great.
It's a fast read.
Sure.
And I also have a memoir called The Addicted Lawyer: Tales of the Bars, Booze, Blow, and Redemption that talks about the things we've talked about today.
Absolutely. I'll put a link for both those two in the description. And what does your daily life look like? What do you do today?
I'm by trade. Either when I'm not writing, I'm right now I'm a keynote speaker. I do a lot of speaking in the legal profession and at recovery events, but COVID has kind of put the kibosh on that.
Yeah.
So, but my schedule is filling up for 22. So I'm hoping that at least as we get after the first quarter of 22, that I'll be back into my public speaking, which is what I do for a living. But I'm working on the sequel to The Ambulance Chaser, and just talking recovery and doing those things, and sharing my experience, strength, and hope, and trying to give hope to those who are struggling.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing everything, and I'm going to put the links down below for anyone who wants to check that out. I myself am definitely going to get a copy and check that out. And congratulations!
Get a copy, dude.
Of course. Congratulations on everything. And, I hope you have a great holiday, you and your family, and I can't thank you enough.
You too, man. It was a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Brian.